Hi guys, Akiba here from CryptoSlate for another episode of the SlateCast. Today with us we have Henry from BTSE. It's going to be really interesting. We're going to be talking about the BTSE exchange, their combined order book, and a whole other set of interesting aspects around the bear market currently and kind of where we're going in the future. So we're just going to roll the intro and then stick around for the full interview. Hello, Henry. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, doing well.
Good.
I love that
What
intro.
time is it? Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? I had to make it quickly before we did the 13-hour live stream because I needed something that I could just play for a second when I wanted to grab a coffee or just like take a breath. So I was streaming for 13 hours straight. And yeah, we just kept it because it's kind of cool. We've got a new one coming out for a new podcast that we are launching, I think, next week. And that's got a whole new intro as well, which is really cool. But thanks for joining us today anyway. So do you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself and sort of the BTSE exchange?
Sure. So I'm a Taiwanese Canadian. I was born in Taiwan, grew up in Canada, Vancouver, West Coast, my entire life, all the way through to university years, and made my way back to Asia sometime during university. I just felt a lot more productive here. I just love the energy. Right, was traveling between Hong Kong, Shanghai, Manila, Singapore, sometimes Korea, Japan, North Asia, and it was just there where I was fascinated and kind of got in touch with crypto as well. Yeah, that's kind of the where I was kind of brought up. And then BTSE exchange, we are more regulated out in the European Union. So we're EU regulated. But we have staff globally. We have technology teams across Asia. We have some business development. We have some other research and development teams in Europe as well as in the Middle East.
Fantastic.
And
So
Taipei at the moment, back to hometown.
So as an exchange, I know we were talking offline the other day. You focus more on the B2B aspects, kind of up to this point. Do you want to talk us through kind of how you're helping to sort of like power some of the other aspects of crypto?
Yeah, so I mean, compared to the other exchanges that you see, on their global top 10 ranking or whatnot, some of the monsters of the world, right? The FTX, Binance's, OKX, Coinbase's. We've started our journey a lot in the B2B sector. So we did a lot of stuff in the fiat on and off ramp payments services. We started off in white labeling the exchange. Now, rather than just like selling source code to a potential client, we take on a much smaller number of clients, but we are very hands-on with them. So that means we help them operate, because if you give somebody 150,000 lines of code, they may not know what to do with it, right? How do you source liquidity? How do you price properly? How do you launch a new market? How do you make sure it's stable? How do you, make sure pricing's efficient? Yeah, we try to help with that just so that it becomes successful. But we route all that liquidity back to our kind of central order book. And so that gives a benefit to the whole ecosystem. So all of our white label customers, you call them, are not really customers. They're almost like partners, right? And if they do very well, we continue to invest into them and financially support them and help them grow, because we're not just tied down in our kind of our brand BTSE. We're just there to figure out how do we make a better business overall, right? And a lot of these people are great at user acquisition, at promotion, at education, and if we can be there to kind of power that journey, then it's a win-win situation.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the things you sort of mentioned there is something that I found quite interesting in terms of your order book. On the site, you talk about a combined order book across different trading pairs, and I think it's quite a timely thing to talk about, given the API exploit with FTX and 3 commas recently. We put out an article that showcased that was not just limited to FTX. There was also people like Binance.us that were affected by it. And the way that exploit worked was that someone was able to gain access to someone's API key, but the API key was still locked down to stop withdrawals. So they couldn't just steal money from the funds. So what they did instead is they traded low volume pairs on the exchange, in the buying on one side from their own account and selling from the other side to basically transfer funds with slippage and a loss from fees. But obviously it wasn't their money, so anything that they could gain in the trade was a net positive for them. And the main area of the exploit there, other than the phishing scam to get access to the API key, was the fact that there was trading pairs with low volume, which is a bit of a security risk. So can you just talk through how kind of your combined order book would maybe kind of help solve that problem? Because I could see like lots of methods where if you've got all of your trading pairs in one place working with each other, surely that's going to help reduce the amount of low volume pairs on the platform.
Yeah, I think it's a couple parts to this, right? I think and like you said, the main part may not just be the fact that it was low volume pairs. It started with probably, it sounds like a security, right? A security incident with the withdrawal with the
so it was a phishing scam essentially that someone used to get access to the API key, and then from there the only way for them to steal funds, so to speak, was to trade it out of their account.
Got you. Yeah. So I mean, in the traditional sense, that would be more like market manipulation, right? In a way, right, of how to make that order like that, and kind of wash against yourself to wash it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, at BTSE, it's more like we have an all-in-one order book. I think we were the first exchange, if not one of the only exchanges to do this when we had launched in 2018. And what it is that we're able to help kind of handle the underlying FX so that there is liquidity across any pair you want to trade. So say today you want to go from, example, like it would be like ApeCoin to Tron, right? If you were to do that on a Binance, it might be ApeCoin to BUSD and then BUSD to Tron. What we do is we then allow you to go direct from ApeCoin to Tron and help you minimize the slippage for that. Right? And our market makers like this because as a market maker, instead of parking, let's say $1 million across every single market, you can just park $1 million on with us and allow you to make any market, right? And able to handle and take the trades from there. Now, if we notice any abnormal activity, I think it would just come to our attention a lot quicker than potentially somebody, because we'll be there to handle the other side of the trade. We'll be sitting in the books, right? Well, not us, but whomever market maker is parking on that, parking the liquidity there. So in that sense, I think there is a lot more steps involved, right? Where these things will get picked up and noticed, right? So when the market makers might say, hey, something's going on here, and then we'll probably notice it.
And also surely the additional, surely the additional liquidity also minimizes the risk there as well, because if there's more liquidity in it, then it's harder to wash the trade.
Yeah, they'll realize that somebody's sitting on the book, right? And other market makers enter, right, automatically. So it's we hope it is useful, and we find that like I was saying, just if it's a capital efficient tool for market makers, right, then we love for them to make it. It just makes a healthier market.
So are there any downsides to doing it that way, do you feel? Like why is that not the sort of just the standard across all exchanges?
Yeah, I think part of it is that some people are just not used to it. I think one of the things that goes against that would be how certain products and services pull your APIs, and basically, let's say, for example, you're on CoinGecko, right? You might not see all our pairs. You might just see it all aggregated towards USD. And some people might not be used to it. It may not be the norm to do things. But we weigh the benefits and the costs, right? There are some people out there who, a retail trader that might say, I want to trade everything against, let's say they live in Malaysia and they want to say, I want to trade everything against Malaysian ringgit, right? And the Litecoin ringgit pair may not be as liquid, but they want it with minimum slippage. They want it, then all that becomes available to them.
I think it's an interesting debate that kind of, I think, goes into the user experience conversation around Web3. That there's, I think in order to bring the rest of Web 2 through to Web 3, we've got to make things as easy and as simple as it is in Web 2. Like one click to activate certain things, where there are there's maybe an element of like hardcore crypto enthusiasts that feel like it should be as almost as difficult as possible because it's complicated technology. Do you think that how do you feel in terms of what needs to be done within crypto to kind of improve the user experience and bring people out who are currently like non-crypto native into the space?
Yeah, you kind of have to speak their language, right? So it's almost like if I spoke Chinese to you, I gave you Chinese instructions. It's I brought you down to Taipei and you walked around the city. It's very difficult, right? You have to give people a product and a service in a language they understand. If that's the target audience, then that's what you have to do. So, we focus now a lot on our retail side, onboarding the first user, making sure that they understand what they're buying a crypto asset. What is the local currency they have? What is that valued at against what they're purchasing? If they're doing an earn product for a fixed kind of like a fixed income as they would in a traditional sense, what type of yield they're getting, what does that mean, right? We try to make the UI as simple as possible. And that's really the key differentiator. We get a lot of feedback from users who say, hey, I only use you guys for this product because it's the easiest thing to use compared to every other platform. Then we focus on understand and dissect why that is. Then we find out, like our front end team, our UI team, they have to put a lot of time and work and research to simplify the things that basically taking the abstract complexities away from crypto, right? Like the terminology we use in this space is so foreign, but we're so used to it that everybody just accepts it, right? We have to realize that we're kind of weird. People out there don't understand what we're talking about half the time.
I think the best example is the Reddit NFT launch. Like they didn't use the word wallet; they used the word vault. It was easy to create it within the app yourself. You didn't need to link a MetaMask. They didn't call them NFTs; they called them digital collectibles. And it's one of the most successful NFT launches of the year by removing all of those like phrases that contain friction. No one has to understand what fungible means to buy a digital collectible. DApp Radar put out a report yesterday that I covered that was talking that might be sort of the framework for helping to onboard people into Web3 in the future. It sounds like maybe do you agree with that concept that we need to think about changing up some of the language?
Yeah, I think the people who need to be addressed, right? The audience it's so big, right? And not like, from the language, from the way things look and feel, it just has to, and it's got to be cool, right? Like people want to use things that are cool, that are understandable, that they can relate to, and not just in the world of fashion or anything else, but in the world of tech, right? That we're in. It's our job to kind of make sure that we keep that in mind when talking to these audiences. Now we may have more sophisticated users and guys who understand this stuff a bit better. We have different means of communicating to them, and think, if you really think about it, right? Like the basic core functions of, say, an exchange, a wallet product or something. Good UX is good UX. If it works for the very, brand new user, it probably also works for someone who's a bit more advanced.
Yeah. And I think I'm quite keen on utilizing tools where it's kind of education over time or unlocking kind of advanced features, because it's what you see in Web 2. Like so many times you can like go to like an advanced mode, or you can turn something on in the menu to get access to a more in-depth version of what's going on. I don't see any reason why we can't do something similar in Web 3. But talking about sort of how things are different in Web3 in different areas, one of the other things I wanted to ask you was centralized exchanges have got kind of a bad rep over the last kind of 12 months, I think, with what's going on with Celsius and like BlockFi have all had issues. Voyager had major issues. What do you feel is the role of centralized exchanges compared to sort of non-custodial solutions in the space?
Yeah, that's a good question. Bad rep? What are you talking about? Bad rep? There's no bad rep.
Well, no, you get a lot of people talking about like not your keys, not your crypto, for instance.
Yeah. So no, there is negative sentiment, right? You're absolutely right. It comes down to good and bad actors, right? And this may sound a bit controversial to people who work in legal or who work in compliance, but like centralized exchanges are like regional banks, right? That's kind of the role they play. And anybody who interfaces with crypto the first time, they usually go through an exchange. Most of the time, I'm making a safe assumption there. So what is the role of a centralized exchange from that perspective? It's everything, right? It's your first touch point to a new user. It's your first way of teaching them how to be safe. It's their, it's how they make money, how they lose money potentially, right? As an investor. But the non-custodial part you mentioned, I think there's a way for that to work together with exchanges, with centralized exchanges. Like there is an intersection, right? Non-custodial is something, non-custodial wallets, and that's almost like the ethos and the founding principles of crypto.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that we keep very, very much at the forefront. Like for example, I believe we may be one of the only exchanges where we focused on building like Web3 wallet support. And when someone wants to make a withdrawal, right, we try to bind that to their MetaMask or their for Ether addresses or their Phantom wallet for Solana transactions. And we make it, I mean, not perfect, but we try to make these little extra conveniences tie in and keeping those Web3 users in mind, right? Non-custodial wallets are important, but they may not be for everybody, right? And I think the industry needs to understand that. I think people need to be educated and know what they are good for, right? And that these principles of owning your own keys, et cetera, is important. Maybe some of your funds are non-custodial and some of your funds are custody with somebody. And I think the word custody, right?
That's how I do things. Like I have money on certain exchanges in case I want to make a trade at a certain point, and then I've got my like HODL assets in hardware wallets and stuff. And so I completely agree with that as a concept. Yeah,
I like it. HODL assets, good. What are you hodling? What are you hodling the most?
Bitcoin and Ethereum, like nice and easy and simple. Everything else I kind of trade in and out. My view is always Bitcoin and Ethereum as the highest percentage, and then you've got to have some shit coins in there as well, just in case. You never know. You got to play the lottery at some point, don't you?
You never know, man. In this space, you never know.
But I mean, I would say though that. Like pretty much everyone on Reddit, I think the inverse correlation of my trading portfolio is probably one of the most successful trading strategies you can have, because there's so many different assets out there, and it's like as soon as you sell one, it's going to go up. That's how it feels, anyways, in the space because it's so volatile. But I think what's interesting, and I love your thoughts on this, is that we've seen the least volatile period for Bitcoin pretty much in its history over the last few months. Is that something that you feel is due to a maturity, or is it due to other macro factors? What are your thoughts?
I think volatility, I mean, it's still around. Like if you take a look at the bear market of 18 or something like that, right? And you take a look at the bear market now, if you want to call it that, it's actually relatively slightly more volatile, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, for the last few months, like volatility, it's just a factor of everything that's come down, right? It's the number of people who have, I guess, these assets to punt on, right? It's the number of firms who believe that their strategies need to be withdrawn, right? Their high volatility strategies need to be withdrawn because it just doesn't work in this market, right? Or it may not work in this market. So that's kind of There's obviously volume drops, right? I think that's trying to figure out the most productive kind of response here to that question is, right?
So, I mean, one of the things within the bear market that I have been kind of asking people, because I think it's a fascinating period. You always think of bear markets as builder markets traditionally in crypto. What are some of the innovations and potential investment opportunities that you're looking for in the current bear market? Are there certain problems that you think need to be solved? Do you think we're getting close to solving any of them?
I mean, for investment opportunities, we see a lot of stuff like around, I mean, mostly infrastructure building, right? So take a look at investment opportunities a couple months ago, probably like a lot of people want to take a look at GameFi, NFTs, etc., right? Projects,
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure projects around that. We look a lot for infrastructure projects that help with kind of the trading environment, all in all. We even look at other layer ones that potentially have a potentially we can build a DEX on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the evolving nature of AMMs is a big next step, right? How do these infrastructure providers build tools that just help more of the financial system settle on chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we build tools where these other wallets or exchange services become almost as performant as centralized exchanges? Because it can't be, right? I mean, it probably could, but generally speaking, it wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
All these DEXs, et cetera, they needed to try to get to the performance of a centralized exchange, but they're not quite there yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of projects that are doing interesting things, either being a middleware, or being a layer one that's powering this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And building things so that they are not just beholden to the layer one, right? Building infrastructure projects on top of that.
Yep. So with those sorts of innovations in place, what are you looking for as potential sort of future catalyst to indicate maybe a move back towards a bull market?
I mean, crypto does really well when there's liquidity, right, in the system. So you have to have kind of like from a macro level, like a risk on environment. And a big part of that is probably, how do you get into a new catalyst? How do you sustain it, right? So policy changes, right? Inflation probably needs to be adjusted, and things like interest rates need to stabilize. These are all kind of parts of the system that need to be fixed. But when I say like a particular catalyst, would like a small thing, like, I don't want to say small, but would like a version of, I don't know, NFT tokens coming out, right, be enough to be the catalyst? I don't think so. I think it has to be a perfect storm of a number of events to happen, right, to reverse everything that's taking place.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting is Bitcoin's never gone through a recession before in terms of a global market situation. It was born out of the 2008 crisis. There's some that argue that we're in a recession right now. Should the macro picture not change drastically by the time we get to the halving in 2024, are you anticipating a different response to a Bitcoin halving, or do you feel like that would be still a big enough catalyst to make some sort of movement in the market?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's like priced in way earlier, right, than people realize. So if history was to repeat itself and behavior stays the same, then I wouldn't expect the response to be that much different, right? I think there are narratives and there are reasons that far beyond exceed the halving. I think the halving is just a wake-up call for a lot of people. But I think at one point it kind of changes, right? Like the people's perception of the importance of the halving. Like there's a turning point when it gets really scarce and really, really important.
Well, yeah, I mean, the last halving happened in May 2020, and there wasn't really a big run until like November of that year, maybe even December. So it took a good few months before it started to make a run. But I think it's going to be really interesting. I think no one can predict it, but it's going to be absolutely fascinating if we're still in an economic global downturn when Bitcoin halves. That's going to be a fascinating moment to see what happens over the next, as you point out, is quite correct, not on that day, but over the next, say, 12 months. Do we see a return to the cyclical way of Bitcoin, or do global factors make a difference? I'm going to be fascinating. Have you got any ideas what you think?
No, I mean, I just hope that by that time there is like the Bitcoin, or I mean, any of the, call it Bitcoin, right? So it would like decorrelate from what's happening in the global financial markets. I think that then becomes a more fun environment for us to not just like trade, right, but just create different markets. Or else it gets kind of boring if it's all tied together.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's some of the highest correlation we've ever seen. That the chart massively spiked when you look at correlation between Bitcoin and the S&P, for instance. Like we've never been in a position where it's as correlated. So I think that'll be an interesting moment as well, which could be separate from any other sort of events going on. Is Bitcoin, sort of the global crypto industry, decoupling from the markets, whether that going up or going down, then that's going to be a big moment. What's your thoughts on Ethereum leading the market going forward? Do you think that's a possibility? It's definitely led the market at times this year, whereas usually Bitcoin leads the crypto market.
Yeah, it could be, right? Because I mean, going up to the merge, there were a lot of factors going for it. There are, things, for example, people say it's now deflationary in terms of its issuance. It produces a yield from staking, right? I mean, potentially what you're saying is if it leads the market, could it be like a reference rate for crypto returns? Kind of like in TradFi, we have a risk rate, right? Could that be what it's good for? I think it'll be very interesting to see that. I think with the whole ESG angle that people were touting for the again during the merge, maybe that just takes some time to pick up, right? It takes years for some of this stuff to kick in and be realized. But is it possible for ETH to be leading that? Absolutely. I don't see a reason for it not to be, right? I would hope that the merge went well. Like if 2 years later we figured something went really, really wrong with the merge, then but I think so much time and so much, like the Ethereum developer talent pool is by far the greatest in the space. The mind share of what's available there. And the amount of time and rewards that were given to do the merge, it's like, it's enough, right? Like you probably could not have asked for more, right? So I hope nothing goes wrong with it. And so if nothing does go wrong with it, and yeah, I think it has all the ingredients it needs, right? Potentially lead that.
So just to sort of finish off, we'll also make it fully transparent and clear that BTSE and Henry have become investors in CryptoSlate over the last few months. What are you excited about with that new partnership in the future, what it can bring and what we can do together?
Yeah, I love the disclaimer, much needed in a space like this. But for us, it is very important that we start identifying talent. I think what you guys have done, your entire team, is incredible, right? You guys are very lean operation with a lot of output, a lot of talent, and being able to see that firsthand and see what you guys have built, right? Compared to the other media sites, the other crypto news, the other categories, right? News categories in the space. I think you guys are on a very, very good track. And the reason why we wanted to align with CryptoSlate via an investment was because, it's important to have, as an exchange, as a centralized exchange, it's important to have kind of channels, right, across the industry, whether it's in banking, right, whether it's in KYC, whether it's in media, whether it's in marketing, right, whether it's in, other sorts of tools and services. We want to be able to have a bit of reach. And as we're growing, it's important for us to find the right partners to kind of be a part of their ecosystem as they are part of ours.
No, fantastic, and like really looking to working together more closely in the future. Like one of the things that I joined CryptoSlate back in February, and it was a similar thing. Seeing how the operation works internally, like really blew my mind. The culture that Nate and Matt have created, the way that they have not overspent in crypto. Like you see so many like exchanges. Crypto.com is the perfect example of people just expecting everything to go up all the time. And just throwing money at things. Whereas like we've been around since 2017, Matt and Nate know how to deal with bear markets and continue to grow. And I think that's something that is missing sometimes in this space. People just seem to assume that number only go up at times with running their business. And that can be very difficult in the bear markets, whereas we're just as strong as ever. And yeah, I'm super excited and what's going to happen for the end of the year. So if people aren't already BTSE customers, because obviously you can trade on BTSE as an exchange as well. We talked about the B2B partnerships, but the exchange itself is open to the general public. What would be your recommendation? Is it just go straight to the site, sign up? What can they expect there? Is it a slightly different experience to some other exchanges?
Yeah, I mean, our hope is that it's a rewarding experience. I mean, you go on, you have a first look and you say, wow, this is simple. This is easy, right? What you see is what you get, right? Try or earn products, try something that you may not be doing on another exchange. And it's important that, what we focus on a lot is user convenience, simplicity, right? And if there's feedback on how we can improve that, that's always most welcome. I'm reachable on Twitter on my handle. Yeah, I think what my favorite thing to do, especially with friends and family, is to say, hey, here's our company, here's our product, have a try, go for it, right? You tell me how you feel after using the product, and let me know your thoughts. And that's usually the best feedback and the best way forward for us.
Fantastic. Well, super excited about the future and everything that's happening. I think you've got a really interesting look on centralized exchanges, and I'm in that camp that yes, not your keys, not your crypto may be a true statement, but you're completely right. It's not right for everyone, and it's not also right for all situations. Moving crypto assets across chains at the moment can be much simpler using exchanges, being access to trades and stuff, and I think they have their specific place and their needs, and I, for one, just say I like to diversify in all aspects anyway. So wherever we can, I think it's great. Brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much for coming on this episode of the SlateCast with us. It's been an absolute pleasure, Henry. And I am sure we will have you back again in future if you're happy to come back and chat to us.
Anytime. You have my number. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I'm just going to run the outro, and we'll chat offline in just 2 seconds. Thank you very much. And for this episode of the SlateCast, goodbye.